Hello, I'm Peter Miller. I'm so glad you could join me for tonight's journey. You know, no matter how fast the world spins beyond these walls, or how quiet your room feels right now, you are not alone in this moment. I am here with you through this voice, and I will not leave. I will stay right here, telling you stories until your breathing slows and sleep comes to find you. Tonight, we are companions beneath the same stars. But before we step into those stars together, let me ask you something. Close your eyes for just a moment. Feel the air around you. Is it warm? There a blanket nearby, soft against your skin. Perhaps you hear the hum of a heater or the quiet tick of a thermostat keeping the cold at bay. These are small miracles, tiny acts of grace we rarely notice. Because tonight, as you drift towards sleep in comfort, we are going to walk backward through time, into a place where warmth was not a switch on the wall. It was a battle. A fragile, precious thing you had to guard with your life. Imagine, if you will, the same temperature, the same wind howling across the land, the same darkness stretching for 14, 15, 16 hours. But three very different nights, three very different choices, three ways of facing the winter that refused to end. This is not a story about who was right or who was wrong. It is not about strength or weakness. It is about alignment, about how some people chose to endure the cold together, while others learned to move with it like water over stone. And still others stood alone in the snow, accepting danger as the price of freedom. Winter never changed. What changed was how humans tried to deal with it. Tonight, we will meet them all. The Norse family huddled in their longhouse, breathing the same air as their cattle, sharing warmth in the dark. The Lakota tipi village tucked into a valley where the wind passed through instead of against. The mountain man alone beneath the stars, buckskin soaked, a hot stone pressed against his ribs, and the settler family in their log cabin, believing that walls could replace understanding. You will not hear the clash of swords or the thunder of hooves. There will be no great battles won or lost, only the quiet creak of frost, the whisper of breath in frozen air, and the slow, patient work of staying alive when the world outside wants you gone. So settle in. Let your shoulders drop. Let the weight of the day fall away, because we are about to step into a winter that never knew electric light, central heating, or the promise of spring just a thermostat away. We are stepping into the cold that reveals warmth, the silence that holds every sound, the darkness that teaches us what it means to keep a single flame alive. Are you ready? Then let us begin. Let us walk back through the centuries to a time when survival was measured not in comfort, but in breath. When every morning you woke was a small victory, when the simple act of keeping warm required knowledge passed down through generations, hands roughened by work, and the quiet determination to see one more sunrise. You see, my friend, I've lived through my own winters, not just the ones that freeze the ground, but the ones that chill the soul. I remember a time, years ago, when I was much younger, lost in the mountains of Colorado during a storm that came out of nowhere. The wind howled like a beast, and I had nothing but a thin jacket and my own stubborn will. I huddled under a pine tree, much like our mountain man tonight, and I thought, This is it, Peter. This is where you learn what you're made of. The cold wasn't just biting my skin. It was testing my spirit, asking if I had the grit to hold on. In that moment, I felt connected to those ancient survivors. Not as a historian, but as a fellow human. And here's what I've come to know after all these years. Winter isn't just about the body enduring. It's about the heart finding reasons to beat on. It's the quiet voice inside that says, one more breath, one more step. The wind does not ask permission. It comes from the north, from the sea, carrying salt and ice, and the promise that nothing green will grow for many months. In a longhouse on the edge of Iceland in the year 987, a family of 12 gathers as the sun dips below the horizon for what will feel like forever. This is not the winter you know. This is the winter that teaches you what your body can endure. The longhouse is not beautiful. It is not meant to be. It is a fortress against the cold, built from desperation and stone, and the bones of the earth itself. The walls are not wood, though wood is precious here. They are turf, peat, layers of earth and grass cut into blocks and stacked 2 meters thick, so thick that when you press your hand against the inside wall, you cannot feel the wind screaming on the other side. This is the genius of the Norse. They did not try to defeat winter. They tried to absorb it, to swallow it into the mass of the earth and hold it there, frozen in place, while inside, life continued in the dark. Picture this structure in your mind. 50 feet long, perhaps more, low to the ground, almost as if it is trying to hide from the sky. The roof is not slate or shingle, but more turf, thick as the walls, growing grass in the summer, white with snow in the winter. From a distance, the longhouse looks like a hill, a gentle rise in the landscape. Only the smoke, thin and grey, rising from a hole in the centre, gives away the presence of human life beneath. Step inside with me now. The door is small, barely 4 feet high, forcing you to duck, to bow, to enter the house in a posture of humility. This is intentional. A small door keeps the heat in, the cold out. But it also reminds you, every time you cross the threshold, that this space is sacred. This space is survival. The air inside hits you first. Warm, yes, but also thick, heavy. It smells of smoke and animals and unwashed bodies and fermented milk and damp wool. It smells of life packed too closely together, of breath recycled too many times. Your eyes water, your throat tightens. But you adjust. You have to, because this is home for the next 4 months. The longhouse is divided, though not by walls. At one end, the family lives. At the other end, 20 head of cattle and sheep shift and low in the shadows. You might wonder why animals and humans share the same roof. The answer is simple, and it is brilliant, and it is also brutal. A cow produces 1,600 watts of heat. A single cow. Its massive body, ruminating, digesting, breathing, radiating warmth into the cold air. 20 cows produce 30,000 watts. This is a furnace that eats grass and breathes warm, wet air into the cold. This is technology that predates the written word, refined over centuries of trial and error, of winters survived and winters that killed. The family does not see the cattle as mere animals. They see them as partners in survival. The cattle give milk, yes. They give meat when meat is needed. But more than that, they give warmth. And in exchange, the family gives them shelter, a roof, protection from wolves, a place to stand through the storms that would otherwise kill them. This is the bargain. This is the alliance that keeps both species alive. The fire burns in the center of the room, not in a hearth, but in a shallow pit lined with stones. There is no chimney, no brick structure to channel the smoke upward and out. Just a hole in the roof, a gap in the turf through which some of the smoke escapes. Some, not all. Most of it hangs in the air like a veil, curling along the ceiling beams, searching for a way out, settling into every surface. The rafters are black with soot. The hanging fish, drying in the smoke, turn the color of old leather. And the people, the family, they breathe it in with every breath. Their lungs are coated in soot. Their eyes water constantly. The children cough through the night, small dry coughs that echo in the darkness. And in the spring, when they finally open the doors and let the fresh air in, some of them will not recover. Some of them will carry the damage in their lungs for the rest of their lives, however long or short that might be. This is the trade. Warmth now in exchange for health later. The Norse knew this. They understood the bargain they were making, and they made it anyway. Because the alternative was to freeze, to die in the night, bodies stiff by morning, blue lips, skin like marble. Better to cough in the spring than to never see the spring at all. The mother of the family, whose name we do not know, but whose hands we can imagine, rough and strong and marked by years of work, sits near the fire with a bowl of skyr. Skyr is not quite cheese, not quite yogurt. It is something in between, thick and sour and rich with the fat of summer milk. She made it months ago, in the warm days of July and August, when the cows gave freely, when there was abundance. She cultured the milk with bacteria, let it ferment, strained away the whey, and packed the thick curds into clay pots sealed with beeswax. This is food as preservation, food as time travel. The milk of summer, captured and held, waiting for the hunger of winter. She spoons it carefully, measuring portions, rationing. There is enough for tonight. There may not be enough for tomorrow. And if there is not enough tomorrow, then the family will eat less. They will make one meal instead of two. They will go to bed with hunger sitting in their bellies like a stone. This is normal. This is expected. Hunger in winter is as common as cold. Beside her, a man sharpens a blade, not a sword. The days of raiding are past, or perhaps they were never his days to begin with. This is a knife, a tool, used for cutting leather, for butchering, for the 100 small tasks that keep a household running. He sharpens it every night, not because the blade needs it, but because the motion keeps his hands busy and his mind from wandering into the dark places where fear lives. He is thinking about the stores in the back of the longhouse, the barrels of pickled fish swimming in brine made from seawater and the precious juice of fermented whey, the dried meat hanging from the rafters, strips of lamb and mutton, and the occasional bit of beef, hard as wood, needing to be soaked for hours before it can be chewed, and the stockfish, cod, split and gutted, and hung in the freezing wind until all the moisture is gone, until the fish becomes a plank, a board, something you could use to build with if you were desperate enough. He is calculating, always calculating. How many days until the light returns? How many mouths to feed? How many storms between now and spring? The arithmetic of survival is simple and terrible. Food divided by people multiplied by days. If the answer is less than the time until thaw, someone will die. It might be the old grandfather, already weak, already coughing blood into his hand when he thinks no one is looking. It might be the youngest child, the one who never quite recovered from the fever last autumn. It might be him. It might be his wife. The winter does not care. The winter takes what it takes. A child coughs. The sound is small, lost in the crackle of the fire and the shifting of the animals. But the mother hears it. She always hears it. She sets down the bowl of skyer and moves closer, wraps the child in another layer of wool, another sheepskin, checking the small forehead for fever, feeling the thin chest rise and fall. She whispers something we cannot hear. She leans in close, her breath mingling with the smoke, and whispers into the damp wool, "Not you. I will not let the cold take you." Her hand tightens on the child's shoulder, knuckles white against the soot. She knows the firewood is low. She knows the grandfather stopped eating yesterday, but she stares into the dark with the ferocity of a cornered wolf. "I will burn the walls of this house before I let you freeze." It might be a prayer to the old gods, the ones the priests say they should no longer worship, but who still live in the stones and the wind and the sea. It might be a promise. It might be a lie. "I will keep you warm. I will keep you safe. You will see the spring." These are the things mothers say. Whether they are true or not does not matter. They must be said. The Norse did not have much. They did not have medicine for the cough that rattles in small chests. They did not have antibiotics or thermometers, or the knowledge that smoke inhalation causes permanent damage to growing lungs, that the particulate matter settles in the alveoli and scars the tissue and makes every breath a little harder, a little shallower for the rest of a shortened life. But they had each other. And they had a plan. Survive together, or do not survive at all. As the night deepens, the family begins to prepare for sleep. They do not undress. To undress is to invite death. They sleep in their day clothes, layered wool and linen, the same tunics and leggings they have worn for weeks, unwashed because water is too precious to waste on bathing, because wet clothes in winter can kill you faster than a wolf. They pile together on the sleeping platforms, raised wooden beds built along the walls, covered in straw and sheepskins and whatever blankets and furs they possess. The children nestle between the adults. The smallest ones are placed in the center, where it is warmest, where the heat from 4 or 5 bodies converges into a pocket of warmth that might, if they are lucky, last through the night. The oldest man, the grandfather, lies on the edge, where the cold creeps in through the cracks in the turf, where the draught from the door finds its way along the floor. He does not complain. This is his role. He has lived long enough to know that the young must be protected, even at the cost of his own comfort, his own warmth, his own life if it comes to that. The animals settle too. The cows lie down, folding their massive legs beneath them, their breath steaming in the dim light. The sheep huddled together in a corner, their fleece thick and oily, shedding water, trapping air, creating a blanket of warmth around their bodies. The longhouse becomes a single organism, breathing in unison, heart rates slowing, body temperatures merging into a shared pool of warmth. Outside, the wind howls. It throws snow against the turf walls. It tests every seam, every gap, searching for weakness. But the walls hold. The earth absorbs the cold. And inside, there is only the soft sound of breathing, the occasional crack of the fire, the low murmur of a cow shifting its weight, the whisper of a child dreaming of summer. This is not comfort, but it is survival. And for the Norse, survival was a form of love. They did not win against winter. They simply refused to face it alone. They gathered together, packed tight, breathing each other's air, sharing each other's warmth, enduring the smoke and the smell and the closeness, because the alternative was unthinkable. Alone, they would freeze. Together, they had a chance. Hours pass. The fire burns low. No one rises to tend it. To rise is to break the seal of warmth, to let the cold rush in, to risk waking the others, disturbing the fragile balance of heat and breath and shared survival. So they wait. They endure. And in the waiting, in the enduring, something else happens. Stories begin to surface. The grandfather, half asleep, begins to murmur about the old days, about the summer raids across the North Sea, about the time he sailed to the Shetlands and brought back wool so fine it felt like water in your hands, about the storm that nearly killed them all, about the way the sun looked on the water when they finally saw land. The children listen, eyes closed, drifting between waking and dreaming. These stories are not just entertainment. They are the thread that holds the family together, the proof that there were other days and there will be other days again. They are the promise that winter is not forever, that the world still exists beyond these turf walls, that somewhere the sun is shining, the grass is growing, the sea is full of fish, and the fields are full of grain. These stories are also survival manuals, encoded in narrative. The grandfather talks about the year the ice came early, the year the sheep got trapped on the high pasture, and they had to dig them out of the snow, one by one, carrying them down the mountain on their backs. He talks about the winter when the stores ran out in February, and they survived on nothing but stockfish and melted snow for 6 weeks, and how the children cried from hunger and how the adults pretended not to hear. He talks about these things so the children will remember, so that when they are grown, when they have children of their own, they will know what to do. They will know how to ration, how to endure, how to survive. This is the winter of the Norse, long, dark, smoky, shared. A winter where the cold outside is met with the heat of bodies, the warmth of stories, the quiet determination to see the sun rise again, no matter how far away it seems. They built walls of earth to keep the wind out. They brought animals inside to share the warmth. They packed together family and livestock in a space that would feel claustrophobic to us, but felt like safety to them. And they survived. Not comfortably, not easily, but they survived. And in the morning, when the thin grey light finally filters through the smoke hole, they will wake, they will cough, they will spit black phlegm into the fire. They will check the stores again, count the fish again, measure the grain again. They will let the animals out to stand in the snow and eat what little hay remains. And they will do it all again. One more day, one more night, until the light returns. Ah, my dear listener, as I think of those Norse folk huddled in their longhouse, it reminds me of my own grandfather, a man who weathered the Great Depression like a Viking enduring the frost. He wasn't a sailor or a warrior, but a simple farmer in rural England, sharing a cramped cottage with his kin, breathing the same stale air, rationing every crumb. He'd tell me, with that gravelly voice of his, "Peter, life ain't about the space you got. It's about the hearts you share it with." In his twilight years, as I sat by his bedside, he whispered how the hardest winters forge the strongest bonds, how loneliness kills quicker than cold. As your friend tonight, I see myself in him, guiding you like he guided me. Remember, in your own dark seasons, reach for those around you. It's not weakness, it's the oldest wisdom. Now, let's shift our gaze across the seas to the Native Americans, where the land isn't an enemy, but a teacher. Imagine yourself as a wanderer in the plains, feeling the wind not as a foe, but as a whisper of guidance. Now, let us walk across an ocean and a continent to a different kind of night. The Great Plains stretch endlessly beneath a sky so clear and cold that the stars seem close enough to touch. It is the winter of 1620, though no one here counts the years that way. This is the moon of popping trees, when the sap inside the cottonwoods freezes and expands and splits the bark with a sound like rifle shots echoing across the frozen land. A Lakota band has made their winter camp in a valley, sheltered from the wind that screams across the open prairie, close to a frozen creek where the ice is thin enough to break for water. The tipi stands against the snow, a cone of buffalo hide stretched over lodgepole pine, smoke rising from the peak in a thin, steady stream. From the outside, it looks fragile, temporary, as if a strong gust might tear it away and send it tumbling across the plains like a leaf. But this is an illusion. The teepee is not built to resist the wind. It is built to let the wind pass through, to move with it, to dance with it rather than fight. And in this movement, in this yielding, there is a kind of strength that the longhouse, for all its mass and weight, does not possess. Step closer. Look at the way it is positioned. The door faces east toward the rising sun. Yes, but also away from the prevailing wind that comes from the west and north. The back of the teepee leans into the wind, braced against it, using the natural slope of the valley to deflect the worst of the gusts. This is not accident. This is knowledge. Knowledge passed down through so many generations that no one remembers who first figured it out. Knowledge written not in books, but in the placement of every teepee in every camp, in the way the poles are arranged, in the angle of the smoke flaps at the top. Inside, a family of 6 sits in a circle around a small fire. The fire is not large. It does not need to be. The teepee has a secret, a piece of engineering so elegant, so perfectly suited to its purpose that it took centuries to perfect and can be explained in minutes but understood only through experience. Between the outer hide and the inner space, there is a liner, a second skin of buffalo hide that hangs from the poles and reaches almost to the ground, leaving a gap of perhaps 6 inches at the bottom. This liner creates a pocket of air, an invisible cushion that insulates the interior from the cold. But it does more than that. The fire heats the air inside this pocket, and the warm air rises, pulled upward by the natural convection and by the draft created by the smoke flaps at the top of the tipi. Cold air enters from below, from that 6-inch gap, circulates through the space between the liner and the outer hide, warming as it rises, and exits at the peak, carrying the smoke with it. The result is a convection current, a living breathing system that regulates itself. The tipi breathes. It inhales cold air at the bottom, exhales warm smoky air at the top, and in the process it keeps the interior warm and the air clear. No smoke hanging in the air like the Norse longhouse, no burning eyes, no soot-coated lungs, just clean air warmed by fire, circulating constantly. The fire itself is made from cottonwood, chosen because it burns clean and steady, with little smoke and few sparks. The wood was gathered in the fall, cut into manageable pieces, dried near the cook fires, and stored in a stack just outside the tipi, close enough to reach without leaving the warmth. The flames are small, almost meditative, casting soft shadows on the hide walls. The family does not need a roaring blaze. They need consistency. They need a fire that will last through the night without consuming all their wood. A fire that will still be glowing when they wake in the darkness before dawn. A woman sits closest to the fire, her hands moving slowly, deliberately, threading sinew through holes punched in a piece of hide. She is mending a pair of moccasins, not making new ones, but repairing old ones because materials are precious and nothing is wasted. These moccasins are not just footwear. They are survival. The soles are made from thick buffalo hide, the part from the neck where the skin is toughest, able to withstand rocks and ice, and the constant wear of walking. The uppers are deerskin, soft and flexible, shaped to fit the foot exactly, no gaps where snow can enter. Inside each moccasin, there is a layer of dried grass for insulation. Not any grass, but a specific type, one that stays flexible when dry, that does not crumble or compress, that creates air pockets to trap warmth. Over the grass, there is rabbit fur turned inward so the soft side touches the foot, the fur side facing out. When she walks in these moccasins, her feet will stay dry and warm, even in snow that reaches her knees, even in temperatures that would freeze exposed skin in minutes. This is not luck. This is knowledge. Knowledge about which animal skins work best, which grasses insulate, how to cure the hide so it stays soft in the cold, how to stitch it so the seams do not leak. Beside her, a man is working on a length of sinew, twisting it between his fingers to make it stronger, rolling it against his thigh to compress the fibers, preparing it to lash a new blade to the shaft of a lance. The blade is stone, carefully knapped from flint, sharp enough to cut through hide and muscle and bone. The shaft is ash wood, straight and strong, sanded smooth with a rough stone. He does not speak as he works, There is no need. The work itself is a kind of conversation, a dialogue with the materials, with the buffalo that gave its tendons, with the ash tree that gave its branch, with the land that provided everything they need. This is the Lakota way, not to dominate the land, but to listen to it, to learn its rhythms, to move with it rather than against it. The land provides, but only if you know how to ask, only if you pay attention to the signs. The way the elk move in the fall tells you where they will be in the winter. The thickness of the beaver pelts tells you how hard the winter will be. The way the geese fly, the way the crickets sing, the way the moss grows on the north side of the trees, all of it is information. All of it is survival. A child, perhaps 5 years old, is wrapped in a buffalo robe, the fur turned inward, the leather side facing out. The robe is enormous, large enough to cover 2 adults, and the child is lost in its folds, a small face peeking out from a mountain of fur. But this is intentional. The robe is not just for one person. It is for the family, a shared warmth that can be passed around the circle as needed. When the child sleeps, the mother will take part of the robe. When the mother works, the child will have it all. This is sharing. This is survival. But look closer at the mother's eyes. As she passes the robe, she watches the rise and fall of that small chest, and a thought, sharp as flint, cuts through her peace. If the buffalo do not return, if the deep snows trap us here. She pushes the thought away, exhaling slowly, but for a second her hand trembles against the hide. The gratitude is real, but so is the terror. In the silence of the plains, starvation is a wolf that walks softly. The child's face is visible, eyes wide and dark, watching the fire, watching the parents, watching the shadows dance on the hide walls. This is how the child learns, not through instruction, not through lessons, but through presence, through watching the hands that know what to do, through feeling the rhythm of the work, the pattern of the day, the flow of the family. The child will grow up knowing how to mend moccasins, how to twist sinew, how to read the land, not because anyone taught these things explicitly, but because they were absorbed, breathed in with the smoke, learned through the hands and the eyes, and the quiet attention to how things are done. Outside, the wind picks up. You can hear it now, a low moan that rises and falls, testing the tipi, pressing against the hide, searching for weakness. The poles flex slightly. The hide ripples like water, like a sail catching wind. But the tipi does not resist. It leans, just a little, absorbing the force, redirecting it. The wind passes over and around, and inside, the fire barely flickers. This is the genius of the tipi. It does not fight, it yields, and in yielding, it survives. Think about this for a moment. The Norse built walls to resist the wind, thick walls of earth that would not move, that could not move. And those walls worked. They kept the wind out, but they also trapped the family in place. When the climate changed, when the winters grew longer and colder, the Norse could not simply pack up and move. They were rooted, fixed, bound to their longhouses and their fields. The Lakota were different. The tipi can be taken down in less than an hour. The poles can be lashed to a horse or a dog to make a travois. The hide can be folded and carried. The family can move, following the buffalo, following the water, following the shelter. When the camp in this valley runs out of firewood, they will move to another valley where the cottonwoods are thick. When the creek freezes solid, they will move to a place where springs keep the water running. They are not trapped. They are fluid. The man sets down the sinew and reaches for a leather pouch. Inside is pemmican, the food that makes winter survival possible. He takes a piece, no larger than his palm, dense and dark and heavy. He passes it to his wife. She breaks it in half, gives one piece to the child, keeps the other for herself. The man takes another piece for himself. This is dinner. It does not look like much, but appearances are deceiving. Pemmican is made from dried buffalo meat, pounded into powder until it is almost dust, then mixed with rendered fat and crushed berries. The ratio is precise. Too much meat, and it will be dry, crumbly, hard to digest. Too much fat, and it will spoil. But when the ratio is right, when the fat coats every particle of meat, when the berries add just enough moisture and flavor, the result is a food that can last for years, that will not freeze in winter or spoil in summer, that provides enormous amounts of energy in a small package. In this small handful, there are 700 calories, enough to keep the body warm through the night, enough to fuel another day of work, of hunting, of hauling wood and breaking ice and tending the fire. The fat, rich and pure, provides the slow-burning energy that the body needs in extreme cold. When the temperature drops, the body burns fat to stay warm, and pemmican gives the body exactly what it needs. But pemmican is not just food. It is also medicine. The berries, though few, carry just enough vitamin C to keep scurvy at bay, though the family does not know this in scientific terms. They only know that their ancestors made pemmican this way, and their ancestors survived. And so they make it this way too. They know that in the deep winter, when there are no fresh plants, no greens, no berries on the bushes, pemmican keeps them healthy, keeps their teeth from falling out, keeps their skin from bruising, their wounds from failing to heal. This is traditional ecological knowledge, not written down, not taught in schools, but carried in the body, in the hands, in the quiet certainty that what worked before will work again. As the night deepens, the family begins to tell stories. Not the sagas of the Norse, full of battles and gods and faraway lands across the sea. These are different stories. Stories about the land, about the buffalo, about the winter when the snow came early and deep, and the band had to move 3 times before they found a valley sheltered enough to make camp. About the old woman, grandmother's grandmother, who could read the sky, who knew when the blizzard was coming 3 days before it arrived, because she watched the way the birds flew and the way the horses stood and the way the clouds gathered on the western horizon. These stories are survival manuals, encoded in narrative, passed from one generation to the next. They are not entertainment, though they entertain. They are memory. They are the map that keeps the band alive. The child listening tonight will remember these stories in 20 years, when it is time to choose where to make winter camp, when the sky looks a certain way and the decision must be made quickly. The stories will surface. The child, now grown, will remember, and the knowledge will continue. There is a story about the buffalo, about how, in the old days before horses, the hunters would drive the buffalo over cliffs, stampeding them, guiding them with fire and noise and careful positioning. But the story is not just about the hunt. It is about what happened after, about how the band would camp at the base of the cliff for weeks, processing the meat, scraping the hides, cracking the bones for marrow, wasting nothing. About how they would give thanks to the buffalo spirits, acknowledging the sacrifice, promising to use every part to honor the gift of life with life. This is not sentimentality. This is theology. This is the understanding that humans are not separate from nature, not above it, not outside it. Humans are part of the cycle. The buffalo eats the grass. The human eats the buffalo. The human dies and returns to the earth and becomes grass again. There is no waste in this system. There is only transformation. And to waste, to take more than you need, to kill without gratitude, is to break the cycle, to dishonor the relationship, to risk the buffalo not returning next year. The fire burns lower. The family does not add more wood. They let it die down to coals, glowing red and steady, radiating heat without flame, without smoke. They wrap themselves in their robes. The buffalo hides that smell of smoke and earth and the wild, that carry the scent of the animal that gave its life so they could have warmth. They lie down in a circle, feet toward the coals, heads toward the edge of the tipi. The child is placed in the center, as always, where it is warmest, where four bodies create a pocket of heat that will last through the night. And as they drift toward sleep, the man murmurs a prayer, not to a distant god in the sky, but to the buffalo, to the land, to the wind that did not destroy the tipi tonight. Thank you. We are still here. We will see the morning. We will honor your gift. We will use what you have given us. We will teach our children to do the same. This is the winter of the Lakota. Mobile, adaptive, attuned. A winter where survival is not about building walls, but about knowing when to move, when to stay, when to trust the land to provide. They did not try to control winter. They adjusted their lives around it. And in that adjustment, they found not just survival, but a kind of grace. A way of being in the world that was not about conquest or domination, but about relationship, about listening, about moving with the rhythms of the land rather than against them. The tipi breathes. The family breathes. The wind passes over. And in the morning they will wake, and they will check the snares, and they will break the ice on the creek, and they will do the work of another day, one more day, until the geese return, until the grass is green again, until the buffalo come back and the cycle begins anew. Let me pause here as your elder companion in this quiet hour to share a lesson from my own path. Years ago, I traveled to the American Southwest, seeking solitude in the deserts, much like the native peoples attuned to their lands. The sun scorched by day and the cold pierced by night. But I learned from an old Navajo elder who invited me to his fire. He said, "Peter, the earth doesn't fight you. It teaches if you listen." We sat under stars, and he shared tales of ancestors who danced with the wind, not against it. It changed me, taught me that true strength is surrender, alignment with the flow. As your friend, your teacher in this moment, I urge you, in life's winters, don't battle every storm. Bend like the tipi, let the gales pass through. It's not defeat, it's wisdom born of ages. Now, let's climb higher to the lonely peaks where one man faces the cold with nothing but his resolve. Picture yourself as that mountain man, the silence wrapping around you like a cloak, testing if your inner fire is enough. Now we leave the camp, the family, the shared fire. We climb higher into the Rockies, into a loneliness so vast it becomes a kind of presence, a weight, a thing you can feel pressing against your chest. The year is 1836. A man sits alone beneath a spruce tree at the edge of a frozen stream. His name might be Jedediah, might be Jim, might be any of 100 names that have been lost to time. The name does not matter anymore. What matters is that he is here, alone, in temperatures that would kill an unprepared person in hours. The thermometer, if he had one, would read 40 degrees below zero. But he does not have a thermometer. He has only his body, and his body is telling him things. That his fingers are numb inside his mittens. That his toes have lost feeling an hour ago. That his breath freezes in his beard, forming a mask of ice around his mouth and nose. That every inhale burns his lungs, the cold air like knives, like broken glass, scraping the delicate tissue. This is the kind of cold that makes the air itself feel solid. That turns spit to ice before it hits the ground. That makes the snow squeak beneath your boots, because it is too cold to melt, too cold to compress. This is the kind of cold that kills, and he knows it. He has seen men die from this cold, has found their bodies in the spring, frozen solid, faces peaceful, as if they simply lay down to sleep and never woke up. The cold, at the end, is said to feel warm. The body, shutting down, floods itself with false signals, tells you to take off your coat, to lie down in the snow, to rest, and if you listen, you die. So he does not listen. He sits. He waits. He tends his small fire and counts the hours until dawn. He is wearing buckskin, head to toe, buckskin. It is the uniform of the mountain man, and it is both his salvation and his curse. Buckskin is made from deer hide, tanned with the animal's own brain, worked until it is soft and supple, cut and stitched into shirts and pants and moccasins. When dry, buckskin is warm, flexible, durable. It breathes, allowing sweat to evaporate, preventing the buildup of moisture that can chill the body. It moves with you, stretches, does not bind or chafe. It is nearly silent, allowing you to move through the forest without giving yourself away to the animals you are hunting. But when wet, buckskin becomes something else entirely. It becomes heavy, cold, a second skin that clings and chills and refuses to dry. And out here, in the snow, in the wind, buckskin is always wet, from sweat, from melted snow, from the condensation of breath, from the simple fact that the temperature swings from freezing to below freezing to well below freezing, and any moisture from any source turns the hide damp and clammy. He has been wearing the same shirt for 3 weeks, and it has not been dry once. He can feel the weight of it, pulling at his shoulders, soaking the heat from his core. The leather is stiff, frozen in places, the fringe icy, the seams rough. But he has no choice. To take it off is to freeze. To keep it on is to freeze slowly. There is no good option, only the choice between bad and worse. So he keeps it on, and he shivers, and he feeds the fire, stick by stick, conserving his small pile of wood because he does not know how long this cold will last. He shifts his weight, and the snow crunches beneath him, a sound like breaking bones. He is sitting on a buffalo robe, the hide spread over a bed of spruce boughs to insulate him from the frozen ground. The robe is old, worn, patched in places where it tore, but it is still thick enough, still furry enough to provide some barrier between his body and the earth that would drain his heat in minutes if he sat directly on it. In his hands, wrapped in a scrap of cloth, is a stone. He pulled it from the fire an hour ago, when it was too hot to hold, glowing red, radiating heat. He wrapped it carefully in the cloth, then in another piece of hide, and tucked it against his ribs, inside his shirt, pressed against his skin. At first, it burned, almost painfully hot, and he had to shift it, adjust it, find a position where the heat was intense but bearable. Now it is merely warm, a fading warmth, and in another hour it will be cold, just another rock, and he will have to decide whether to risk the exposure of unwrapping himself from his robes to heat another one. This is the calculus of survival. Every decision has a cost. Every movement is a gamble. Unwrap to heat, a stone means exposing your body to the cold, losing precious heat, risking the chill that can settle into your bones and never leave. But not heating a stone means losing your only source of warmth, the only thing standing between you and hypothermia. So he calculates. He waits. He tries to time it so that he changes the stone when the fire is at its hottest, when the process will be quick, efficient, minimizing exposure. His rifle leans against the tree, within arm's reach. Not because he expects trouble, not because he thinks a bear or a wolf will wander into his camp in the middle of the night, but because to be separated from his rifle is to be dead. The rifle is everything. It is food, the tool that brings down elk and deer and rabbit. It is defense, the equalizer against animals stronger and faster than he is. It is status, proof that he is a trapper, a mountain man, a free man beholden to no one. But even the rifle is a problem. Metal becomes brittle in extreme cold. The lock, the mechanism that strikes the flint and creates the spark that ignites the powder, can freeze. The powder itself, in the pan and in the barrel, can absorb moisture from the air and fail to ignite. He keeps the rifle as close to his body as he can, hoping his warmth will keep the metal functional, knowing that if the moment comes when he needs it, if a predator appears or if he sees game, there is no guarantee the rifle will fire. It might click uselessly. The flint might strike but produce no spark. The powder might hiss and smoke but not explode. And then he will be defenseless. He is alone, completely, utterly alone. His partner, a man named Tom, who he traveled with for 6 months, who he shared campsites and meals and the long silences of the trail with, left 2 weeks ago. Tom was smart. He saw the weather changing, saw the snow coming earlier than usual, deeper than usual, and he made the decision to head south, to find a trading post, to get out before the passes closed and the real winter set in. Tom asked him to come, argued with him, told him he was a fool for staying, that the beaver were not worth it, that no amount of pelts was worth dying alone in the mountains. But he stayed. He was convinced he could trap one more valley, one more creek, before the season ended. He was convinced the weather would hold, that he had time. He was wrong, and he knows it now, but it is too late to undo. The snow is too deep to travel through. The passes are closed, blocked by drifts 10 feet high. He is here, and he will stay here until the snow melts or until he does not wake up one morning. He thinks about food. He has been thinking about food for hours, for days, for what feels like weeks. His supplies are nearly gone. A handful of pemmican traded from a Shoshone woman he met in the fall at a rendezvous where trappers and Indians came together to trade furs and goods and stories. The pemmican is good, dense, and rich, but he has been rationing it so carefully that each piece is smaller than the last, and he knows that within a few days it will be gone. He also has a few strips of dried elk meat, so tough they have to be soaked in hot water before they can be chewed, and even then they are like leather, stringy and hard, taking forever to break down in the mouth. He set a snare yesterday, a loop of rawhide positioned over a rabbit trail, hoping to catch something, anything, to supplement his dwindling stores. But this morning, when he checked it, the snare was empty. The rabbits, smarter than he is, know better than to move in this cold. They are holed up in their burrows, conserved, waiting for the weather to break. And so is he, waiting, conserving, burning through the fat reserves in his body, feeling himself grow lighter, weaker, colder. He tries not to think about it, tries to focus on the work, on the small tasks that keep him alive, on maintaining the fire, on melting snow for water, on checking his traps, even though he knows they are frozen, knows that no beaver is moving under the ice. He tells himself that when the sun rises, he will do something productive. He will check the traps. He will reset the snare. He will scout for tracks, for any sign of game. He will do something, anything, to keep moving, to keep the blood flowing, to keep the darkness at bay. And in that terrible silence, a face floats up from the past. Not a trapping partner, a woman, maybe a wife, maybe a daughter he left in St. Louis 3 years ago. He remembers the warmth of a hand in his, a warmth no hot stone can replace. He looks at the vast, indifferent stars and asks them, "Is this freedom? To be king of the mountains, but a beggar for a human touch?" A tear leaks from his eye and freezes instantly on his cheek. He wipes it away, angry at his own weakness. But deep down, he knows the truth. The beaver are gone, moved to deeper water or simply inactive, waiting out the winter in their lodges. The traps are useless, frozen solid into the ice. There is nothing left to do but endure, to sit by the fire and wait for the cold to pass. And that is the hardest part. Not the cold itself, not the hunger, but the waiting. the endless, grinding, soul-crushing waiting. And so he endures. He wraps his arms around his knees, pulls the buffalo robe tighter around his shoulders, and stares into the darkness. The stars are bright, almost painfully bright, hard points of light in a sky so clear it feels infinite. The Milky Way stretches across the heavens like a river of light, and for a moment he feels something close to wonder. Out here, in the cold, in the silence, the universe feels close. Not comforting, not warm, but present, witnessing. He is a single point of heat in an infinite expanse of cold, a tiny flame in an ocean of darkness. And somehow, against all logic, against all odds, he is still alive. His heart is still beating. His lungs are still pulling in air, freezing though it is. His mind is still working, turning over thoughts, memories, calculations. He is alive, and as long as he is alive, there is a chance that the weather will break, a chance that he will find food, a chance that he will make it through this night and the next night and the night after that, until finally, impossibly, spring comes. He thinks about the men he knew, the ones who did not make it. Tom, not his partner. Tom, but another Tom who fell through the ice in December while checking a trap and drowned before anyone could pull him out. His body swept downstream, never recovered. Samuel, who got lost in a blizzard and was found 3 days later, frozen solid, still clutching his rifle, his eyes open, staring at nothing. And Hugh Glass. Everyone knows the story of Hugh Glass, the man who was mauled by a grizzly bear, his scalp torn open, his ribs broken, his leg shattered. The man who was left for dead by his companions, who took his rifle and his knife and his possessions and left him alone in the wilderness to die. The man who did not die, who crawled, dragged himself 200 miles across the plains and the mountains, surviving on carrion, on roots, on anything he could find, driven by rage and the refusal to let the wilderness win. He met Hugh once, at a rendezvous years ago. Hugh was old by then, scarred, his face a map of violence and survival. Someone asked him how he did it, how he survived when everyone else would have died. Hugh just looked at him, eyes flat and hard, the eyes of a man who has seen too much, who has endured too much, and said, "You do not think, you just move. One hand in front of the other, one breath after the next. You do not think about the 200 miles. You think about the next 10 feet, and then the next 10 feet, and you keep going until you cannot go any more, and then you go a little farther." So he moves. He shifts the stone, feeling the fading warmth against his ribs. He flexes his fingers inside the mittens, working them, forcing blood into the tips, even though it hurts, even though the skin is cracked and raw and weeping. He breathes, slow and steady, watching his breath turn to fog, to ice crystals, to nothing. He counts the hours until dawn. 4, maybe 5. He can make it. He has made it this far. He has chosen this life, this risk, this terrible, beautiful freedom. He could have stayed in Missouri, in a town with a fire and a bed and the company of other human beings. He could have married, settled down, taken up farming or trade. But he came here instead, into the wilderness, into the cold, because out here there are no rules. No one tells you what to do, where to go, how to live. Out here, you are free. Free to succeed, free to fail, free to live or die by your own choices. And that freedom, terrible as it is worth the price, worth the cold, worth the hunger, worth the loneliness. Because the alternative is to be caged, to be controlled, to live a small, safe, suffocating life. And he cannot do that. He would rather die out here, alone, frozen, than live in a town, warm and safe and slowly dying inside. This is the winter of the mountain man. Alone, cold, dangerous. A winter where survival is not guaranteed, where every night is a test, where the only warmth comes from the choices you make and the will you carry inside. He did not survive because it was safe. He survived because he accepted danger, because he looked at the wilderness, at the cold, at the possibility of death, and he said, yes, I choose this. I accept this. And in that acceptance, there was a kind of power, a kind of clarity that no longhouse, no tipi, no cabin could ever provide. The fire burns, the stars wheel overhead, and he waits for the dawn. Oh, the solitude of that mountain man. It's a mirror to the soul's deepest corners. In my own life, I've known such isolation after losing my wife years ago, when grief wrapped me like a blizzard. I retreated to a cabin in the woods, facing nights where the silence screamed louder than any wind. But like him, I found a spark within, memories, resolve, the raw will to greet another dawn. As your brother in this journey, I tell you this from the heart. Solitude isn't always a curse. It can forge you anew, revealing strengths you never knew. Yet, remember, freedom's price is steep. Balance it with the warmth of others when you can. Now, let's descend to the settler's cabin, where structure promises safety, but whispers of doubt creep in. Envision yourself as the father, building walls not just of wood, but of dreams, only to feel the cold test every seam. We descend now from the high country, down from the peaks and the loneliness, into the rolling plains of the Midwest. The year is 1867. A log cabin stands at the edge of a small clearing, surrounded by stumps, the ghosts of the trees that were cut to build it. The cabin is new, built just last spring, and already it is failing. Not catastrophically, not all at once, but in small ways, in the gaps between the logs where the chinking has cracked and fallen out, in the window frame that rattles in the wind, loose in its socket, in the door that does not quite close all the way, leaving a crack through which the cold air pours in a steady, invisible stream. The family does not see these failures yet, or perhaps they see them, but do not understand what they mean. They see the walls, solid and reassuring, thick logs stacked one on top of the other. They see the roof, shingled with split cedar, keeping the snow out. They see the stone hearth, carefully built, the pride of the father who spent 2 weeks selecting the stones, fitting them together, mortaring them with clay and sand. They see structure, safety, civilization, and they believe that they are protected. Inside, a fire burns in the hearth. The hearth is well built, properly designed, with a throat that narrows to create draft, a chimney that pulls the smoke up and out. The fire draws well. The air inside the cabin is clear, no smoke hanging in the air like in the longhouse, no soot coating the rafters. This is progress. This is the triumph of knowledge over wilderness, of human ingenuity over the raw forces of nature. Or so they tell themselves. The family is 5. Father, mother, 2 daughters, 1 son. They sit around a rough table made from split logs, the surface uneven, showing the marks of the axe that shaped it. They are eating dinner. Cornmeal mush, boiled with water and a little salt, served in wooden bowls. A small piece of salt pork cut into slivers, 1 sliver per person, to give flavor to the bland mush. The portions are small, carefully measured. The mother uses a ladle, and each scoop is precise, the same size, no one getting more or less than their share. The supplies are running low. The father had planned to make another trip to town before winter, to buy flour and beans and coffee and sugar. But the first blizzard came early, in October, a month before it should have, and the road became impassable, buried under drifts that reached the belly of a horse. So they make do. They stretch what they have. They eat a little less each day and tell themselves that spring is coming, that the supplies will last, that everything will be fine. The mother watches the children eat, her face calm, but her eyes calculating. She knows how many pounds of cornmeal are left in the barrel in the corner. She has counted them. She knows how many days they can go on like this, eating 1 meal a day, sometimes 2 if the children complain too much about the hunger. She knows that if the snow does not melt soon, if they cannot get to town, they will have to make hard choices. Which child eats first? Which meal gets skipped? How long they can last before hunger turns into something darker, something that eats away at the body and the mind and the spirit. But she does not say any of this. She smiles. She tells the children to finish their mush. She wipes the youngest child's face with a damp cloth. She pretends that this is normal, that this is manageable, that fear is not a cold hand tightening around her heart, squeezing, making it hard to breathe. The cabin is not warm. The fire helps, certainly. Near the hearth, within a few feet, it is almost comfortable. You can hold your hands to the flames and feel the heat on your skin. Feel your fingers thaw, the blood returning in painful tingles. But 10 feet away, at the edge of the room, the air is cold enough to see your breath. The logs, thick and heavy, hold some warmth during the day, absorbing heat from the fire, radiating it back into the room. But they also leak. Cold air seeps in through the gaps, through the places where the chinking has dried and cracked and fallen away. The father has tried to seal them. He has stuffed the cracks with rags, with mud, with a mixture of clay and moss and straw. But the wind always finds a way in. It probes, tests, searches for weakness. And at night, when the fire burns low, when the family is asleep and no one is tending the flames, the cold creeps across the floor like water, pooling in the corners, rising up the walls, claiming the space inch by inch. After dinner, the children huddle near the fire, wrapped in quilts. The quilts are beautiful, the only beautiful things in the cabin. Pieced together from scraps of fabric, stitched by the mother's hands over countless evenings, each square carefully chosen, carefully placed. Each square tells a story, a piece of an old dress, blue calico with white flowers, the dress the mother wore when she was courting, a scrap from a baby's blanket, soft yellow flannel, the blanket that wrapped the first child, the one who died in infancy before they came west. A remnant of the curtains they brought from Pennsylvania, from the house they left behind, the house with glass windows and a wood floor and neighbors close enough to hear if you called. The quilts are not just warmth. They are memory. They are the past, wrapped around the present, a reminder that they were once somewhere else, somewhere warmer, somewhere easier. But that place is gone. They sold the house, packed what they could into a wagon, and came west to claim land under the Homestead Act. 160 acres free, if they could prove it up. If they could build a house and live on the land for 5 years. If they could survive. The father sits at the table, hunched over a ledger, a small book bound in leather, the pages filled with numbers. He is calculating the value of the land, the cost of seed for the spring planting, the price of a plough, which they do not have and cannot afford, the debt they owe to the land office, the fees and the filings, the bureaucratic machinery of claiming wilderness and turning it into property. He writes slowly, carefully, the pencil scratching against the paper, his handwriting rough but legible. He is a man who believes in systems, in structures, in the power of planning and hard work. He built this cabin with his own hands, felled the trees one by one with an axe that he sharpened every night, notched the logs, fitted them together, raised the walls with the help of neighbors who came for a day, who helped him lift the heavy timbers into place, who shared a meal and then went back to their own land, their own struggles. He is proud of this cabin, proud of what he has accomplished. But pride does not keep you warm. Pride does not fill the gaps where the wind comes through. And tonight, sitting in the flickering light of the fire, scratching numbers into his ledger, he is beginning to understand that walls are not enough. That the cabin, solid as it looks, is not the fortress he thought it was. That the wilderness is still out there, pressing in, waiting for a mistake, a moment of weakness, a crack in the armor. The eldest daughter, 12 years old, sits beside her mother, learning to knit. Her hands are cold, stiff, the fingers clumsy. The needles keep slipping, dropping stitches, creating holes in the fabric. But she does not give up. She is trying to make a scarf for her younger brother, who has been coughing for weeks. A dry, persistent cough that rattles in his chest, that keeps everyone awake at night. The mother has tried everything she knows. Hot compresses, rags soaked in boiling water and pressed against the small chest. Onion poultices, raw onions mashed and wrapped in cloth and tied around the throat. Tea made from pine needles, bitter and green, forced down the child's throat with promises and bribes. Nothing works. The cough continues, a small, relentless sound in the darkness, a reminder that bodies are fragile, that children can slip away, that no amount of love can stop the cold from getting in. The mother does not move. She lies awake, one hand on the boy's chest, counting each labored breath. The fire is low now, the room growing colder by the minute. In the dark, tears come, silent, hot, falling onto the quilt she made from pieces of her old life. She thinks of the baby she lost before they came west, the tiny grave left behind in Pennsylvania. She thinks, not again. Please, not again. I built these walls for you. I crossed a continent for you. If I lose you now, what was it all for? She presses her cheek against his hair, whispering so softly only the night can hear. Stay with me, little one. Just stay. And in that moment, all the faith, all the structure, all the hope she has clung to feels as thin as the oiled paper over the window. As the night deepens, the family prepares for bed. They do not have separate rooms. The cabin is one room, 20 feet by 20 feet, a single space that serves as kitchen, living room, bedroom, everything. In the corner, there is a raised platform built from rough planks, a bed frame without a mattress. They pile the quilts on top of the platform, layer after layer, creating a nest of fabric and warmth. They sleep in their clothes, fully dressed, boots off, but everything else stays on. The wool dresses, the flannel shirts, the heavy socks. To undress is to risk freezing. To expose skin to the air is to invite the cold in, to give it a foothold, a way to seep into the body and steal the heat. So they sleep clothed and they pile together, bodies pressed close, sharing warmth in the only way they know how. The children are placed in the middle, between the parents. The youngest child, the one with the cough, is tucked between the mother and the eldest daughter. The son is on the other side, pressed against the father. This is intentional. The children, smaller with less body mass, lose heat faster than adults. They need the protection, the buffer, the warmth that comes from being surrounded. The father sleeps on the outer edge, closest to the door, ready to rise if something goes wrong. If the fire goes out, if an animal tries to get in, if the wind shifts and blows the door open, he is the protector, the guardian, the one who takes the cold edge of the night so that the others can sleep a little warmer, a little safer. The mother sleeps with one hand on the youngest child, feeling for the rise and fall of breath, counting the seconds between coughs. She does not sleep deeply. She hovers in that space between waking and dreaming, aware of every sound, every shift in the cabin. She is listening for the cough, for the change in breathing that might mean the child is in trouble, for the moment when she will need to wake, to act, to do something, though she does not know what. The fire is banked for the night. The father shovels ash over the coals, covering them, slowing the burn, making the fire last. If they are lucky, if he has done it right, there will still be a few live coals in the morning. And they can coax the fire back to life without wasting precious matches, without the laborious process of starting from scratch with flint and steel and tinder. But if the fire goes out, if the coals die in the night, they will have to start over. And that will cost them time and wood and warmth. So the father watches the fire, piles the ash carefully, and hopes. Hope is all he has. Hope and walls, and the belief that structure can protect them from the chaos outside. Outside, the wind picks up. It moans through the trees, the remaining trees at the edge of the clearing, the ones that were too small or too twisted to be worth cutting. It rattles the window, a single small window covered with oiled paper instead of glass, because glass is too expensive, too fragile, too likely to break on the journey west. The paper tears easily, and they have patched it twice already with pieces cut from an old flour sack, glued with a paste made from boiled wheat. The wind finds the crack under the door. It pours in, a river of cold air, invisible but tangible, flowing across the floor, pooling around the bed platform. The family feels it, even in their sleep. They pull the quilts tighter. They curl inward, knees to chest, heads tucked down, making themselves small, conserving heat. The walls hold, but just barely. The logs creak and settle, the wood expanding and contracting with the temperature changes, the gaps widening in the cold. The family lies in the dark, listening to the wind, feeling the cold creep closer. They do not speak. There is nothing to say. They are here, in this cabin, in this winter, and they will either survive it or they will not. They have done everything they know how to do. They have built walls. They have stocked supplies, though not enough. They have created a structure, a home, a place that looks like safety. But tonight, in the dark, the father is not so sure. He thinks about the Lakota, the bands he saw moving across the plains last fall, their teepees packed on travois, pulled by horses, their faces calm and certain, their eyes scanning the horizon for signs he could not read. He thought they were primitive, uncivilized, living without the comforts of a proper home, without walls, without permanence. He pitied them. But now, lying in this cold cabin, listening to his son cough, feeling the wind pour in through the gaps he cannot seal, he wonders, maybe the Lakota were not running from winter. Maybe they were moving with it. Maybe their tipis, light and portable, were not a sign of weakness, but a kind of wisdom. Maybe walls are not the answer. Maybe the answer is something else, something he does not yet understand. Something about flexibility, about adaptation, about reading the land and responding to it rather than trying to force it into submission. But it is too late to change now. The cabin is built. The winter is here. The family is committed. And all they can do is endure. Trust the structure. Believe that the walls will hold, that the fire will last, that spring will come before the supplies run out, before the children sicken beyond recovery, before the cold wins. They believed walls could replace understanding. They believed that by building a house, by creating a structure that looked like the houses they left behind in Pennsylvania, they could recreate the safety, the comfort, the certainty of that old life. But the wilderness is not Pennsylvania. The winter is harsher. The isolation is deeper. And the walls, for all their solidity, are not enough. In the morning, they will wake. They will check the fire. They will eat a small breakfast of cornmeal mush, even smaller than dinner. They will ration the wood, the food, the energy. They will wait for the thaw, and they will hope, because hope and walls are all they have. As we leave the settler's flickering hearth, I feel a kinship with that father, doubting his walls in the dead of night. In my travels as a storyteller, I've met modern pioneers, folks building lives in remote places, trusting plans over instinct. One man in Alaska shared how his cabin nearly broke him until he learned from indigenous neighbors to blend structure with nature's flow. "Peter," he said, "walls keep out the wind, but understanding keeps out despair. As your wise companion, your mentor in these tales, I share this chiem nnghiem, life's structures, jobs, homes, Routines are illusions of control. When they crack, seek the deeper alignment. It's the quiet voice of experience that saves you. Now, as we compare these worlds, let's weave them together, seeing not differences, but the shared humanity in every choice. Imagine us sitting by a communal fire, you and I, pondering these lives as brothers in time. So, here we are, 3 nights, 4 groups, the same winter, the same cold, the same darkness pressing down on the earth like a hand, like a weight, like a presence that has always been and will always be. Let us step back for a moment. Let us look at what we have seen, not with judgment, but with curiosity, not to decide who was right or wrong, but to understand the choices, the trade-offs, the particular genius, and the particular failures of each approach. Let us go back, first, to the longhouse, to the Norse family, wrapped in smoke and warmth, bodies pressed together, breathing the same air as their cattle. Think about what they chose. They chose mass, weight, permanence. They built walls so thick that the cold could not penetrate them in a single night. Walls of earth and grass that absorbed the heat from the fire and the animals and held it, radiating it back slowly, creating a thermal battery that could sustain them through the long dark. This worked. Make no mistake, it worked. The Norse survived winters in Iceland, in Greenland, in the harsh edges of the North Atlantic, where the wind screams and the sea freezes and nothing grows. They survived for centuries, but the cost was high. The air inside the longhouse is toxic. We have talked about this, but let us really understand it. The smoke from the fire, unable to escape through a proper chimney, hangs in the air. Particulate matter, tiny particles of carbon and ash, and incompletely burned wood float suspended, invisible but deadly. The family breathes this in with every breath. The particles settle in the lungs, in the delicate alveoli, where oxygen is exchanged for carbon dioxide. They cause inflammation, scarring. Over time, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, respiratory infections. The children, their lungs still developing, are especially vulnerable. And then there are the animals. 20 large mammals living in close proximity to humans, sharing the same air. They bring parasites, lice, fleas, bacteria, viruses. The Norse lived in a constant state of low-level illness, their immune systems constantly fighting infections, their bodies never fully healthy. This is the trade. Warmth now in exchange for health later. The Norse understood this bargain, whether consciously or not. They saw the old people coughing blood. They saw the children who did not live to adulthood. But they also saw the alternative. They saw what happened to people who tried to winter alone, who did not have the mass of earth and animals to protect them. Those people froze. So the Norse chose the smoke. They chose the illness. They chose life, however compromised, over death. Now let us step outside, away from the smoke, away from the walls. Let us walk across the snow to the tipi. The Lakota family, sitting in a circle, the fire small and steady, the air clear and breathable. What did they choose? They chose flow, movement, adaptation. They built a structure that worked with the wind instead of against it, that managed air currents like a living thing. that breathed in cold air at the bottom and exhaled warm smoke at the top. The tipi is not warm the way the longhouse is warm. There is no mass of earth to hold heat, no cattle breathing warmth into the air. The tipi is warm because the family tends it, actively, constantly. They feed the fire. They adjust the smoke flaps, angling them to account for changes in wind direction. They manage the system. This is work, constant work. You cannot neglect a tipi. You cannot bank the fire and go to sleep and hope it lasts through the night. You must wake. You must tend. You must participate in your own survival. But in exchange for this work, the Lakota gained something the Norse did not have: freedom, mobility, the ability to move when the land changed, when the resources in one valley were exhausted and it was time to find another. When the creek froze solid and there was no more water, the Lakota did not sit and wait for it to thaw. They packed up the tipi, loaded it onto a travois, and moved to a place where springs kept the water running, where cottonwoods provided firewood, where the valley walls blocked the worst of the wind. The Norse could not do this. Their longhouse was not portable. It was fixed, permanent, rooted in place like the fields around it. When the climate changed, when the little ice age brought longer winters and shorter summers, when the grass stopped growing and the cattle started dying, the Norse could not simply move. They were invested, committed, trapped by their own success, by the very structures that had kept them alive. And so, in places like Greenland, the Norse settlements failed. Not because the people were weak or stupid or unprepared, but because they could not adapt. They held on to their way of life, their cattle-based agriculture, their European model of survival, even as the land changed beneath them, even as the Inuit, who had lived in that environment for thousands of years, thrived using different methods, different technologies, different ways of thinking about the relationship between humans and the land. This is the lesson. The longhouse strategy works when the environment is stable, when the resources are predictable, when you can plan and prepare and store. But when the environment changes, when stability gives way to chaos, the longhouse becomes a trap. The very mass that protects you also binds you. You cannot run. You cannot adapt. You can only endure. And sometimes endurance is not enough. The tipi strategy is the opposite. It sacrifices stability for flexibility. It requires constant work, constant attention. But it allows you to move with the land, to follow the resources, to adapt to change. And in an unstable environment, in a world where the buffalo migrate and the rivers flood and the droughts come without warning, that flexibility is survival. So, which is better? The question is meaningless. Better for what? Better when? Better where? The Norse strategy was perfect for the stable agricultural societies of Scandinavia in the centuries before the Little Ice Age. The Lakota strategy was perfect for the mobile, hunting societies of the Great Plains, where resources moved and survival depended on reading the land and responding quickly. Neither strategy is universally superior. They are tools, shaped by different environments, different resources, different ways of life, and each comes with costs. Now let us add the mountain man to this picture, the man alone beneath the spruce tree, clutching his stone, counting the hours until dawn. He fits into neither category. He is not building mass like the Norse. He is not moving with the land like the Lakota. He is simply enduring moment to moment, using whatever he has, whatever he can find, whatever he can improvise. His survival strategy is precarity. He has no community to fall back on, no family to share the work, no tradition of knowledge passed down through generations. He has his own strength, his own skill, his own stubborn refusal to die. And sometimes that is enough. Hugh Glass survived. Jedediah Smith survived for a while. John Coulter survived, running naked through the snow, chased by Blackfeet warriors, making it back to the fort through sheer will and luck. But for every Hugh Glass, there were a dozen men who did not make it, who died alone in the mountains, their bodies never found, their names forgotten. The mountain man's strategy is high risk, high reward. It offers complete freedom, but at the cost of complete isolation. It allows you to go where no one else can go, to trap the valleys that are too remote, too dangerous for anyone else. But it also means that when something goes wrong, when you break a leg or run out of food or get caught in a blizzard, there is no one to help. You live or die alone. Compare this to the Norse. They survived through community, through the collective effort of the family, the clan, the settlement. No one person had to carry the entire burden. The work was shared. The warmth was shared. The risk was shared. But that sharing came at a cost. You were not free. You were bound to the group, obligated to them, dependent on them. You could not leave. You could not strike out on your own. Your survival was tied to theirs. The Lakota had a middle path. They had community, the circle of family and band, the shared fire and the shared stories. But they also had mobility. They could move. They could adapt. The community moved together, yes, but it moved. It was not fixed. And that combination, community plus mobility, was perhaps the most resilient strategy of all. The mountain man had neither. He had no community, no mobility in the sense of a group that could pack up and move together. He had only himself, and that made him both the freest and the most vulnerable of all. Let us think about food now, about the way each group sustained themselves through the winter. The Norse had stores, barrels of skyr, smoked fish, pickled meat. They had planned for winter, worked all summer and fall to put away enough food to last. When winter came, they did not hunt. They did not gather. They simply consumed what they had stored. This is the agricultural mindset. Produce more than you need. Save the surplus. Live off it when production stops. This strategy requires foresight, planning, the ability to delay gratification, to not eat everything now, but to save some for later. It also requires storage technology, barrels, salt, fermentation, ways to keep food from spoiling over months. The Norse had all of this. They were good at it. They survived winters that would have killed people without stores. But this strategy also has a failure mode. If the harvest is bad, if the summer is too short, if the cattle die, if the fish do not come, then the stores are inadequate, and there is no backup plan. You cannot suddenly start hunting in the middle of winter when you have never hunted before, when you do not know how, when the animals are scarce and the snow is deep. You are locked in. You eat what you have stored, and when it runs out, you starve. The Lakota did not rely on stores alone. They had pemmican, yes, which could last for months or even years. But they also continued to hunt through the winter. They fished through the ice. They tracked deer and elk through the snow. They worked for their food, even in the coldest months. This is a different mindset. Not storage, but flow. Not surplus, but sufficiency. Take what you need, when you need it, and trust that the land will provide. This strategy requires skill, knowledge, the ability to read tracks, to understand animal behavior, to know where the deer will be in deep snow, where the fish gather under the ice. It requires physical ability, the strength and endurance to travel in harsh conditions, to hunt when most people would be huddled by the fire. But it also provides resilience. If the pemmican runs out, you hunt. If the hunting is bad in one place, you move to another. You are not locked in. You have options. The mountain man had neither stores nor confidence. He had a handful of traded pemmican, a few strips of dried meat, and hope. Hope that he would find game. Hope that his traps would work. Hope that he could make it one more day. This is gambling. This is living on the edge. And it is exhausting. But it is also, in its way, a strategy. The mountain man came to the mountains to trap beaver, not to survive winter. Winter was an obstacle, a problem to be endured in pursuit of the goal. He was not trying to thrive in winter. He was trying to get through it with minimal resources so that he could continue trapping, continue making money, continue his pursuit of freedom and fortune. This is a fundamentally different relationship to winter than either the Norse or the Lakota had. For the Norse and the Lakota, winter was part of life, an expected phase of the annual cycle. For the mountain man, winter was an interruption, a threat to his economic activity. He resented it. He fought against it. He tried to minimize his investment in it, carrying as little food as possible so he could move light and fast, gambling that he could make it through, that his strength and skill would be enough. Sometimes it was. Sometimes it was not. In this tapestry of comparisons, I see threads of my own life woven in. As a young man, I chased adventures like the mountain man, risking all for freedom, only to learn in later years the value of the Lakota's harmony or the Norse's bonds. One winter in Scotland, trapped in a storm with strangers, we shared stories like these, becoming family in the cold. It taught me, survival isn't solitary. It's the human spirit connecting across eras. As your guide, your confidant, I whisper this truth. Embrace the lessons of all, for life's winters demand a blend of heart, wisdom, and will. Now, let's delve deeper into the souls behind these strategies where psychology meets the frost. Now, let us go deeper still. Let us look not just at the walls and the fires and the food, but at the people themselves, at the psychology of survival, at the way each group maintained their sanity, their sense of self, their reason to keep going through the endless dark. Think about the Norse father in the longhouse. He is trapped, not just physically by the winter and the walls, but psychologically by his own choices. He chose to settle. He chose to build a permanent home, to plant fields, to raise cattle. Those choices brought stability, security, the promise of a future, but they also brought responsibility. Heavy, crushing responsibility. He cannot leave. He cannot move. If the winter is too long, if the stores run out, he will watch his children starve. There is nothing he can do about it. He has no control. He has planned as well as he can, worked as hard as he can, but in the end, his survival depends on factors beyond his control. The weather, the harvest, the health of the livestock. He can only wait and hope and endure. This is a particular kind of psychological stress, the stress of powerlessness combined with responsibility. He is responsible for his family's survival, but he does not have the power to ensure it. He can only do his best and hope it is enough. And that gap between responsibility and power is where fear lives. The Norse coped with this fear through ritual, through community, through the structure of shared survival. The longhouse was crowded, yes, claustrophobic, smoke-filled, but it was also full of people, full of presence, full of the constant reminder that you are not alone, that others are enduring the same thing, that your suffering is shared. They coped through storytelling. The grandfathers' stories about the old days, about the raids, about the storms survived, and the fish caught, and the times they almost died, but did not. These stories served a function beyond entertainment. They were proof that winter ends, that people have survived before and will survive again, that the dark is not forever. They coped through ritual drinking and feasting. The Yule celebrations held at the darkest point of winter were not just religious observances. They were psychological survival mechanisms. They broke the monotony. They created moments of joy, of excess, of release. They reminded the family that life is not only suffering, that there is also pleasure, connection, celebration. These moments were crucial. They provided something to look forward to, a bright spot in the endless grey. Now think about the Lakota mother in the tipi. She is not trapped in the same way. She knows that if the game moves, they will move. If the firewood runs out, they will find more. She is not fighting the winter. She is listening to it, watching the signs, reading the land. And when the land tells her it is time to move, she will move. This is a different psychology. Not endurance, but adaptation. Not powerlessness, but responsiveness. She has agency. She has options. If one strategy is not working, she can try another. If this valley is not providing, they can go to another valley. She is not locked in. But this also requires a different kind of strength, the strength to let go, to pack up everything you own and walk into the snow, trusting that the land will provide, that the buffalo will be there, that the new camp will be better than the old. This requires faith, not religious faith necessarily, but faith in the land, in the knowledge passed down through generations, in the patterns that have held true for hundreds of years. The Lakota coped with winter through story, but their stories were different from the Norse stories. The Norse told stories of the past, of heroic deeds and distant lands. The Lakota told stories of the land, of the animals, of the patterns and cycles that governed life on the plains. These stories were not just memory. They were maps. They were survival manuals encoded in narrative. The winter counts, the pictorial calendars where each year was named for a significant event, served a psychological function as well as a practical one. They provided continuity, They proved that time moves forward, that years pass, that winters end and springs come. They gave structure to the endless white, the unchanging landscape. They reminded the family that this winter, hard as it is just one winter among many. It will be remembered, it will be named, and then it will be over, and the next year will come. The Lakota also coped through ritual, but their rituals were different. They were not about excess like the Norse feasts. They were about gratitude, about acknowledging the gifts of the land, about maintaining the relationship with the buffalo and the earth. These rituals reinforced the worldview that kept them alive. The idea that humans are part of the land, not separate from it. That the land provides, but only if you treat it with respect, only if you take what you need and give thanks for it. This worldview was not just spiritual. It was practical. It kept the Lakota from overhunting, from depleting the resources they depended on. It kept them moving, rotating through hunting grounds, allowing each area to recover. It kept them alive. Now think about the mountain man, alone beneath the tree. No family, no community, no stories shared around the fire. Just him and the cold and the silence. The psychological toll of this isolation is hard to overstate. Humans are social animals. We are not built for prolonged solitude. Our brains, evolved over millions of years in small groups, start to malfunction when deprived of social contact. We hear voices. We see things that are not there. We lose track of time, of reality, of our own identity. This is what the frontiersmen called cabin fever. The irritability, the paranoia, the restlessness that comes from being trapped alone in a small space with nothing to do and no one to talk to. Some men coped by talking to themselves, by talking to their horses, their dogs, even their rifles. Anything to create the illusion of conversation, of connection. Some men coped by writing, by keeping journals, detailed records of the weather, the game they saw, the distance they traveled. The act of writing imposed structure on the chaos. It created a narrative, a sense that their life had meaning, that their experiences mattered enough to be recorded. Jedediah Smith kept a journal. Osborne Russell kept a journal. These men wrote not because they thought anyone would read their words, but because the act of writing kept them sane. It gave them something to do. It created a sense of purpose. It was a way of talking to themselves, of processing their experiences, of maintaining a sense of identity when the wilderness threatened to erase them. But many men did not cope. Many men went mad. There are stories recorded in those journals of trappers who simply walked away from their camps and were never seen again. Of men who became convinced that they were being followed, hunted, watched. Of men who killed themselves rather than face another winter alone. The mountain man's freedom came at a terrible price. He was free from the obligations of family, from the rules of society, from the expectations of others. But he was also free from support, from companionship, from the psychological buffers that keep humans stable. And that freedom, for many, became a prison of its own. A prison of isolation, of silence, of the vast indifferent wilderness that did not care whether they lived or died. Let us think now about the settler family in the cabin. They fall somewhere between the Norse and the mountain man. They have family, community of a sort, but they are also isolated, cut off from neighbors by miles of snow, from the larger society by the distance they traveled to get here. The father believes in structure, in systems, in the idea that if you plan well enough, work hard enough, you can control your fate. This belief is what brought him west, what gave him the courage to leave Pennsylvania, to load his family into a wagon and travel across a continent to claim land in a place he had never seen. But winter is teaching him that some things cannot be controlled, that nature does not care about your plans, that the wilderness is not Pennsylvania, and the old rules do not apply here. This is a hard lesson. It shakes his faith in himself, in his ability to protect his family, in the very structures he has built. The mother knows this already. She sees it in the way the chinking falls out of the walls, in the way the supplies dwindle, in the way her son coughs through the night. She knows that walls are not enough. But she cannot say this. She has to maintain the illusion of safety for the children's sake, for the family's sake. So she smiles and rations the food and pretends that everything is fine. This is its own kind of psychological burden. The burden of pretending, of maintaining hope when you are terrified, of acting calm when you are screaming inside. And it is exhausting. The settler family copes through routine, through the daily rituals of survival, feeding the fire, melting snow for water, cooking meals, mending clothes. These tasks provide structure, a framework for the day. They create the illusion of normalcy, of control. If we can just get through today, they tell themselves, we can get through tomorrow, one day at a time. They also cope through faith. Many settler families were deeply religious, and that faith provided a psychological anchor. The belief that God had a plan, that suffering had meaning, that endurance would be rewarded. This belief helped them make sense of the hardship, to see it not as random cruelty, but as a test, a trial that would make them stronger. Whether this belief was true or not is beside the point. What matters is that it helped them survive. It gave them a reason to keep going, a framework for understanding their suffering, a promise that the pain would end. But faith could also be a trap. It could prevent people from making necessary changes, from admitting that their strategy was not working. If you believe that God brought you to this land, that this cabin is where you are meant to be, then leaving feels like a failure of faith. And so you stay, even when staying is killing you. The Norse had community. The Lakota had mobility. The mountain man had freedom. The settlers had faith. Each of these was a tool for psychological survival, a way to maintain hope and sanity through the dark. And each had its costs, its limitations, its failure modes. None of them were perfect, but all of them, in their own way, worked. Because the people using them believed in them, and belief, in the end, might be the most important survival tool of all. I remember sitting by a hospital bed once. It wasn't the wilderness. It was a room filled with machines, blinking lights, steady heat, all the comfort the modern world could offer. And yet, I held a hand that was growing cooler in mine, and I felt a coldness inside me that no thermostat could touch. I remember thinking, I would trade all this electricity, all these walls, just to keep this one fire lit for one more hour. We are all just tending fires, aren't we? Hoping they last until morning. As we wrap this comparison, my friend, let's sit in the quiet for a breath. I've seen in my 70-odd years how belief shapes survival during war, loss, renewal. Once, in a remote village in Vietnam, a place close to your heart perhaps, I shared rice with locals enduring floods, their faith in cycles mirroring the Lakotas. Peter, an elder, said, "Winter passes, the rice grows again. Or, as your teacher, your ally through this night, I offer this. Your beliefs are your true shelter. Question them gently, align them wisely, and they'll carry you." Now, as dawn nears in our tale, let's close with warmth, knowing we're companions in every storm. And so, we come to the end of our journey, the end of the night. The same night in 4 different places. The Norse family, asleep in their longhouse, wrapped in smoke and warmth and each other. The Lakota family, curled beneath buffalo robes, the fire reduced to coals. The tipi swaying gently in the wind that has become almost a companion. The mountain man, alone beneath the stars that wheel slowly overhead. The stone at his ribs cooling, his breath slowing, waiting for the light that he knows will come, that must come, because it always has. The settler family, packed together on their platform bed, quilts piled high, listening to the wind test the walls, hoping the chinking holds, hoping the fire lasts, hoping spring comes before the food runs out. They are all still alive. For now, they have made it through this night, and tomorrow they will wake, and they will do it all again. Build the fire, ration the food, watch the sky, count the days, because that is what winter demands. Not heroism, really, not genius, just persistence, the quiet, stubborn refusal to give up, the decision to keep breathing, keep moving, keep tending the fire, one more day, and then one more after that. But here is the thing that all of this teaches us if we listen carefully enough. Winter never changed. The cold is the same today as it was 1,000 years ago. The wind howls the same. The darkness lasts just as long. What changed was how humans tried to deal with it. Some built walls, thick walls of earth and stone, creating fortresses against the cold. Some moved with the wind, building structures that breathed and flexed and could be packed up and carried to the next valley. Some stood alone in the snow, accepting the risk of isolation in exchange for freedom. Some trusted in the structure, in the belief that planning and hard work could create safety. And all of them, in their own way, found a way to survive. Not comfortably, not easily, but they survived. And each strategy, each choice, revealed something about what they valued, what they were willing to sacrifice, what they believed about the relationship between humans and the world. There is no one right answer, no perfect strategy, no culture that got it completely right. The Norse had their strengths and their weaknesses. The mass of their longhouses kept them warm, but trapped them in place. The Lakota had theirs. The mobility of their tipis gave them freedom, but required constant work. The mountain man had his. The freedom of solitude came with the price of isolation. The settlers had theirs. The structure of walls and faith gave them hope but could not guarantee safety. And each group, each individual, had to decide what they valued most: safety or freedom, community or solitude, control or adaptation, stability or flexibility. And those choices shaped not just how they survived the winter, but who they became, what stories they told, what they passed down to their children, what they believed about the world and their place in it. So what does this mean for us, here, now, in the warmth of our homes, with our heaters and our blankets, and our certainty that morning will come, and with it, warmth and light and safety? It means that we are not so different. We are still making the same choices in different forms, still deciding whether to build walls or stay mobile, still choosing between comfort and risk, between community and independence. We live in our own kind of longhouses now, climate-controlled, insulated, filled with the hum of machinery that keeps us warm. And, like the Norse, we are comfortable. But we are also trapped, in a sense, dependent on systems we do not control, on electricity and natural gas and supply chains that can fail. When the power goes out, when the blizzard comes, when the systems we depend on break down, we are often more vulnerable than our ancestors were. Because we have forgotten the skills they knew. We do not know how to build a fire from scratch, how to butcher an animal, how to read the weather in the clouds and the behavior of birds. We have gained comfort, but we have lost resilience. And that is a trade-off worth thinking about. Or maybe the lesson is not about which strategy is best. Maybe the lesson is about alignment, about finding the approach that fits who you are, what you value, what you need. Winter does not reward strength, not strength alone. Winter rewards alignment. It rewards the person who understands their own limits, their own resources, their own capacity for endurance or adaptation or solitude, and who acts accordingly. The Norse aligned with community. They built a life that required people, that was impossible without people. And in that requirement, they found meaning. They endured the smoke and the sickness because the alternative was to be alone, and they could not bear that. The Lakota aligned with the land. They built a life that moved with the seasons, that listened to the wind and the buffalo and the stars. They did not try to dominate. They tried to understand, to fit themselves into the patterns that already existed. And in that fitting, they found a kind of peace. The mountain man aligned with himself, with his own will, his own strength, his own refusal to be bound by anyone or anything. He chose freedom over safety, solitude over companionship, and he paid the price, willingly, because for him the freedom was worth it. The settlers aligned with faith and structure. They believed that hard work and planning and the grace of God could create safety in the wilderness. Sometimes they were right, sometimes they were wrong. But the belief itself, the structure it provided, was what kept them going. None of them were wrong. None of them were entirely right either. Because survival is not about being right, it is about being alive. And sometimes being alive means making compromises, breathing smoke, packing up and moving when you are exhausted, sitting alone in the dark, counting the hours, trusting in walls that leak. It means doing whatever it takes, even when it is hard, even when it hurts, even when you are not sure you can make it one more night. But you do. You make it, because that is what humans do. We survive. We adapt. We endure. We find warmth in the coldest places. We build fires in the dark. We tell stories to keep each other awake, to remember who we are, to pass knowledge down to the next generation. And we wait, together or alone, for the morning. The morning always comes. It might be late. It might be later than you hoped. The winter might last longer than you planned for, might take more than you wanted to give. But the morning comes. The light returns. The ice melts. The grass grows green again. And the people who survive are not necessarily the strongest or the smartest or the best prepared. They are the ones who aligned their strategy with their reality, the ones who understood what they had, what they needed, and what they were willing to sacrifice. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, warm and safe in your bed, I want you to think about them. The Norse family breathing smoke in their longhouse. The Lakota family under buffalo robes in their tipi. The mountain man alone beneath the stars. The settler family huddled together, hoping the walls hold. They are gone now, all of them, lost to time. But their choices remain. Their strategies, their trade-offs, their wisdom, and their mistakes. And in those choices, in those strategies, there is something we can learn. Something about resilience, about flexibility, about the cost of safety and the price of freedom, about what it means to survive, not just physically, but psychologically, spiritually, about what it means to face the cold and the dark and the uncertainty, and to keep going anyway. Because winter is not just a season. It is a metaphor, a test, a question that each of us must answer in our own way. How will you face the cold? Will you build walls? Will you move with the wind? Will you stand alone? Will you trust in structures? And whatever you choose, will it keep your fire burning through the night? I hope so. I truly hope so. Because the night is long, and the cold is real, and we all need warmth in whatever form we can find it. We need the warmth of community, like the Norse. The warmth of alignment with something larger than ourselves, like the Lakota. The warmth of our own unbreakable will, like the mountain man. The warmth of faith and structure, like the settlers. We need all of it, because winter does not care about your strategy. Winter only cares whether you survive. And survival, in the end, is not about having the perfect plan. It is about having a plan that fits you, that you believe in, that you can sustain through the dark, and then having the courage to follow it. Day after day, night after night, until the light returns. Thank you for being here with me tonight, for listening, for walking with me through these long winters, these different nights, these varied strategies of survival. I hope you sleep well. I hope you wake warm. I hope that tomorrow, when the light returns, you carry a little of their strength with you. The strength to endure, the strength to adapt, the strength to keep going, no matter how cold it gets. And I hope you remember that you are not alone, that across time, across cultures, across continents, humans have faced the same darkness you face. And they survived, not because they were special, but because they refused to give up, because they tended their fires and told their stories and waited for the dawn. The dawn always comes, always, even when the night feels endless, even when you are not sure you can make it one more hour. The dawn comes, and with it warmth, light, hope, the promise that winter is not forever, that spring will return, that life continues. So sleep now, rest. Let the weight of the day fall away. Let the stories settle into your dreams. And know that when you wake, the sun will be there, waiting for you, just as it waited for the Norse and the Lakota and the mountain man and the settlers, just as it has waited for every human who ever faced the dark and chose to keep going. Good night. Stay warm, and may your fire burn bright through all the winters to come.